Welcome to the Brand Theory Podcast, the podcast for helping you uncover your passion, realize your purpose, and take the aligned action. Together, we're going to prove the theory that when we live our lives on brand, the possibilities become limitless. I'm your host, Danielle Marquesi, branding expert and business coach. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Brand Theory Podcast. Today, we are chatting with Sarah Hagstrom, a business coach for health coaches. After selling $5,000 health coaching packages and hitting 13K months as a health coach, others started asking for help. So she started sharing. Now she helps her clients go from 0 clients to fully booked out and a waitlist in less than 6 months. She's also the host of the Why Can't I podcast. She works and lives with her husband, Peter, in sunny San Diego. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Sarah and I met on the good old gram, the Instagram, or I guess it was really in a Facebook group, but we really started chatting over on Instagram, which is why I love the power of social media and the good things that it brings us and connections and all that. And we had a really cool, genuine connection inside Instagram, and I'm very excited to continue that conversation today.
Yay, I'm excited too. I love social media too. I know it gets a bad rap, but I think it is so good for making connections.
Well, I think it's like the way we use it. And I was just talking to this with somebody I knew earlier of how I'm noticing this trend of all the craziness of 2020. I'm noticing this trend of we're really getting back to those genuine human connections on social media. And here you are sitting in front of me. Okay, so I know we covered a little bit about who you are, what you do inside your intro, but I'd love to hear in your own words kind of your journey of entrepreneurship, how you got to where you are now. I think my listeners really love hearing those transformation stories, and I think that was something I loved hearing when I was first starting out. It's almost like slowly building my confidence of being able to hear how other people were doing it who are kind of just like me. So go for it.
Yeah, so I have been working online since 2011, so for a very long time. And I think if people saw my Instagram now or found me now, they would be very surprised to hear all of the transitions I've made and the evolution. And I think at the beginning, I definitely thought, okay, I got to figure out what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do that for the rest of my life, So I went to college for something completely different. I went to college for law. I wanted to be a lawyer.
Wow.
Yeah. So very different. I was working at a law firm, and kind of the moment where everything changed for me is I had always struggled with my health, and I'm going to kind of like do like the Cliff Note version. Otherwise we'll be here all freaking day with my story. But I found a plant-based diet and I learned about nutrition, and now I think it's so popular. But at the time I wasn't familiar with, how you eat can affect how you feel. And so I started changing my diet, and I just got obsessed with it. I was like, how did I not know this? This is insane. This is crazy. Like all of this time I've been sick. I was missing school, just like so many issues. And so that kind of like made me pause and be like, do you really want to go down this career path just because, for me, I definitely came from this family that didn't have a lot of money. Neither one of my parents graduated college. And so I just had this kind of like, oh, I need to prove myself. I need to make something of myself. I need to make my family proud. And so I was like, do you really want to do that? Or do you want to do something like meaningful? Right. And that kind of started me down this path of entrepreneurship and being like, I want to do something that feels good, right? That feels good to me and that makes an impact in the world. And so I started out as a health coach online. That's really how I started my business. I started health coaching, doing lots of different things. And that was going really well. I mean, it took me probably, if I'm being honest, probably like 4 to 5 years to really be able to make enough money for me to go full time, for my husband to go full time too, because he also kind of interesting story. If you follow us on Instagram, you'll see like we're very similar. He's also plant-based. He's also a health coach. He also now does business coaching, like we're just like on this path together.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And so yeah, it took me a while to figure it out. And when I figured it out, I started getting like all of these other health coaches, and I would go to events, and I realized that what I thought everybody online was successful. I thought everybody on Instagram was
Mm.
just like, they had their stuff figured out. They knew what to post, they knew what to charge, they had all the clients. And like, I was on like the struggle bus, and I was like the last person to figure it out. Right.
Yeah.
And so once I finally figured out how to make money, how to help people, what worked, what didn't work, some of my clients started asking me, how did you do it? Like, can you help me do it? And I had never, ever thought about that. I was like, I'm doing health coaching forever. I love it. It's so
Yeah.
great. And one of my clients, she like begged me, and I was like, okay, like let's have a session. Let's see how it goes. And it was from that point on, it was game over. I loved it. It was so much fun. My husband was like, who were you talking to? You were so excited. You were so lit up. And I told him, and he's like, oh, that's interesting. And it just kind of slowly evolved into business coaching for health coaches.
I love that. Okay, let's talk about that pivot, because we were talking a little bit about this before we hit record, but I feel like people are so scared of that pivot. They're so scared to even, first of all, recognize that it's a thing and then take the action, because like you were saying, we kind of get into business, or we even get into our careers after high school, going into college. We think we have to decide, and that's what we're doing for the rest of our lives, because that's kind of the trend we saw happening before us, whether it's parents, aunts, uncles, that generation. That's just what they did. Like, health coaching wasn't a thing when when they were going through their teenage years and the college years. So when we start a business and all of a sudden we're getting this intuitive pull, it sounds like your story was really, really kind of almost instant, but I feel like maybe you were feeling those intuitive pulls before then. So can you walk us through making the decision to pivot and then kind of like going for it?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is the experience I had before,
Mm.
that really helped, because by the time I had gotten to that place, I had recognized myself holding on to things that
Mm.
weren't serving me in the past, and how as soon as I released those, I was able to move forward. And that looks like a lot of different things. It can look like having more joy. It can look like, more ease, more flow, more opportunities. And so kind of having that experience was really helpful for me, right? And I always ask myself, if what I'm doing right now isn't serving me, then like, what do I have to lose? And that is kind of like my MO. That's kind of my
Yeah.
personality type, where I act really quickly before my mind can talk me out of something. And it doesn't always work out. Sometimes I get myself in trouble. I overcommit, but my personality is like, do it, say yes. And like, if you're feeling pulled to say yes, say yes, and like figure it out afterwards.
Yeah. I feel like, maybe was there a time in your business where you were afraid to say yes? Like in the beginning, were you not saying yes to things, or did you kind of try everything, or were you always the try everything and then figure it out later, or did that kind of was that a work in progress to get to that point?
Yeah. I know for like listeners, I want to be like, oh, I had that. I was afraid to do it, and then I just did it. But honestly, I have kind of always been that way. Just kind of like jump in and figure it out.
Yeah.
And a big part of it, like something to ask yourself, is like, what do you want? Because for me, I just got to the point with like my business and my life where my desire to have it was so strong that I'm
Yeah.
willing to do whatever it takes.
Yeah. And I think that's like where we say the word hustle culture. Hustle has kind of a bad connotation, but at the same time, we almost have to go on through that quote unquote hustle period to figure out what we want, to really paint that clear picture of the desire. Would you agree?
I would agree 100%. I think that because I have a background in health, it's very important to find that balance, right? So you're not burning yourself out. But I do think at the beginning, like, you have to hustle to figure out like what's your passion, and to make enough progress to find out, because at the beginning it's hard to tell, right? It's not until, like, for me and like my clients, once they're actually like working with clients and they're showing up and they have some things in motion that they can say, oh, I do like this, or actually now that I'm doing this and like working with clients, like
Yeah.
this actually isn't the path for me. But if you don't get in far enough, it's hard to tell if this is what you're supposed to be doing or not.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. So how does somebody like you, who says yes to all the things and trying all the things, how do you find, because I watch you on Instagram. I've totally stalked you since we started talking, and you do have this really good balance, at least that you portray, of kind of the lifestyle, the personal development, or the you time, the time you spend with Peter, your one-on-one. How do you balance it all?
Balance looks differently for everybody,
Mm.
right? So Like my threshold, one thing that I've noticed is when I first started my business, I would look at what other people are doing, which is like what we all do. I mean, I still look at what other people are doing
Yeah.
too, right? But I would really be like, okay, that's the model. That's how it's done, you know? And I remember having like a friend who I met online, and she was telling me, I was like, what's your day like? Like, tell me about it. She's like, I have 8 one-on-one coaching clients on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so what did I do? I was like, okay, 8 coaching clients, you know? And as a brand new coach, I was exhausted. I was
Yeah.
drained, you know, I was so tired. There's no way I could do that. Now I probably could do that. I don't want to do that. But I probably could do that. And so a big part of balance is figuring out like, what does that look like for you? And then knowing like when you're just starting out with business, your balance is going to look different because you don't have that capacity
That's so
to hold
true.
space for so many people and so many things. So I really just like kind of like tune into like what I'm needing, and it changes each day. But like, if you think about it, I've been online since 2011.
Yeah.
And so I've been figuring out how to balance all of the things. So like for me right now, Instagram stories, Instagram, creating programs, launching programs, working with clients, that's all pretty easy for me. What's more challenging is like the Instagram reels and like
Oh my gosh, I
videos,
can't even get into it. I can't do it.
right? Like it's like that takes me so long,
Yeah.
and I have no balance when I'm doing those. I'm like, I need to figure this out. I'm here for like 3 hours, and then
Yeah.
what I end up creating looks like a 5-year-old created. And I'm like, what is happening? You know? So if you guys looked at my reels, you'd be like, this girl does not know what's going on, right? So it's just like it looks different for everybody. But
Yeah.
over time, you get better, and it becomes, you know, more flowy, which is I like.
Yeah.
I like to be in the flow.
Totally. And I think that's, again, another one of those things where you kind of have to do it to learn it. You have to go through it to figure out your own balance, your own take on things. So I love that. I would love to ask you what it's like to wake up, eat with, go to sleep with, spend your day with, and work with your husband. And not that you're in the same business. I don't know if your businesses cross over, but I feel like I'm seeing so many people do this, of their husbands or significant others, whoever, are also getting into the whole business thing. Were you the first to start your business? What was that like? And what is it like to just have your significant other kind of do the same thing and on this kind of entrepreneur journey with you?
It's crazy. It's wild and it's insane. It's insane and beautiful at the same time. I just wrote a post this morning on Instagram about Peter
I
and I.
didn't read it yet. I went in and saved it because I want to read it later.
We've been together for 14 years, which people are always like, oh my gosh, are you guys high school sweethearts? No, we met right in my last year of high school. He was a year older, so like pretty close, but no, we weren't like going to prom together.
Yeah.
So it's wild. It's so freaking wild and beautiful at the same time. The thing about us is we were together, and then we both realized we didn't want to be in the careers that we were in, and we weren't fulfilled. And so our story is crazy in the fact that we changed our diet and lifestyle at exactly the same time and did it together. So part of it was we both found like a plant-based diet. That's like a big part of our story. And we changed together. And then we both found entrepreneurship. We both read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week.
It's a great
We read
one.
that book together, and we were like, wow, people can only work 4 hours a week. P.S. You guys, I work way more than 4 hours a week, way more than 4 hours a day. But we're like, wow, that's so awesome. And so it's for us, it's always been at the same time. So we both were like, let's start a business,
Yeah.
right? At the same time, and going through it together. The thing that we found though, is we've had to have like roles. So we work together. It's one business. So I do most of the coaching. I'm like the face, social media, all of that. Peter does a lot of the tech stuff. And both of us, like, we didn't have a background in business. Peter did one thing that's kind of interesting that I was thinking about it today when I was writing the post is he went to school for construction management. So
Cool.
he's good at like managing things, right? So that's been really helpful, managing projects and all of that. And really, you know, you're seeing more and more people doing it. I always encourage my clients, like if they're health coaches and they have like a partner who's around and like is more like tech savvy, I'm like, dude, get him on board. He'll like help your business grow so much faster, because at the beginning, like we couldn't afford to outsource to a web designer or a graphic designer. And like, that's the beauty of the internet, is like, you can figure it out. Like if you want it badly enough, like I'm a big fan of hiring support and help if you can, but if you can't, like YouTube is your best friend. And so for him, I was like, you got to learn how to build a website. You got to learn how to put my words on my video. He still does
Yeah.
that. I'm like, babe, I need captions on this, you know? So it's wild and it's crazy. And, you know, we've had to figure it out when your business isn't going well. It's really hard, like on your relationship, because it's like, for us, it's our livelihood. And so when we were
Yeah.
building, it's like, this isn't working, nothing's working. And then like, that's all we're talking about. And there's no boundary between like business and relationship. And so
Yeah.
it definitely has been kind of a roller coaster, but now, you know, few years into it, we feel like, you know, we still have rough days, but it's kind of like he has his roles, I have mine. We have more people that we work with too. And like everybody kind of has what their responsibilities are. And then we
Right.
also have cutoff time. So for me, it's like I start my day at 10 a.m. and then 7 p.m. Like after 7 p.m., I don't want to talk about business. Like if we end earlier, cool. But like 7 p.m., we're not talking about business anymore.
Yeah, that's so important. And I feel like another example of how you found your flow by doing it. And you didn't know all the answers at first, but you just kind of found your flow. I love that. And I think, I'm sure, just because of the vibe I'm getting from you, you guys are probably really into personal development and you read the 4-Hour Work Week. So I feel like that alone probably makes obviously the relationship and the work relationship that much better. But I feel like your conversations just as a couple in general are probably so much more, I don't even want to say elite, but like elite to somebody who's not doing that work together. I really, really am seeing this more frequently with couples who are, whether one person starts or the other person starts, or they do it together. It's just the bond that they have by doing that work, either on their own or together, is so, so special. And it's growing their businesses and their lives like that much faster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Peter and I talk a lot about like, what do you want? Like, what do you want your life to look like? What are you going after? Because, you know, it can be difficult when one person is like, hey, you know, I'm on this path. And the other person is like, well, I don't know where my path
Yeah.
is. You know, I hear from a lot of my clients who are like, my partner isn't into this. Like, how do I get them into this? And I always say, you know, you have to focus on yourself and like find a way to create together. One thing that Peter and I learned a long time ago, we're really into like Abraham Hicks and Jack Canfield, lots of like personal development, was this process of creating together, right? So it's really easy for me to be like, oh my gosh, we're going to do this and we're going to go here and all the things and it's going to come together. And then it's like, hey, Peter, do you want to come with? And he's like, wait, where are we going? What's happening? You know? And so before I get too far ahead, I'm like, okay, bring it back down, bring him in on the conversation and like, let's build this thing together. And that's kind of like our process for our life, like always checking in, like, where are we going with our life? What do we want to do? Are we on the same page? Is everybody's needs being met? And then same thing with business. And it is different, right? It's like the same process, but it's like our relationship has to be different than our business.
Yeah. So, so important. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. So as we were chatting in the DMs, we were chatting a little bit about personal branding and how you believe it has been kind of a big part of the success you've had. And like I said, I totally admitted that I stalked you, and you do really do a good job at kind of taking us on that journey, both inside your business and inside your life, with everything with Peter, but also like this morning you were picking a fruit and we had a whole conversation about it this morning. And I'm sure you're kind of having conversations in your social media about that too. So how did you find getting into that process of sharing a little bit more of the personal side or the personal life? Was that always easy for you? Has it grown? Just tell us a little bit more about that journey.
Yeah, it's grown. It's grown. When you first start out with your business, at least my clients and myself, we kind of go to this place of like wanting to show like we know what we're talking about. And so a lot of times what happens is it's very factual and it can seem
Gosh,
kind
that's
of
so true.
right. And it's like, I think part of it is like, we want to show that like, we know what we're talking about and we want to help. And I
Yeah.
think some of it, we're not very conscious. I know for me, like one, you know, it can seem like, oh, you know, Sarah just takes action so quickly and that's so great. But what can happen is, for me, I would take action so quickly and I would move really fast, but in the wrong direction. And so I wasn't as effective as if I would have kind of slowed down a little bit. And so really like what I recommend is like slowing down and paying attention. Like when it comes to social media, like what do you remember, right? When it comes to purchasing from people, like who do you buy from and why? And what I was finding was the people that I connected with were not the people who were sharing all of the facts and tips and things that I could Google. It was the people who were sharing their life, right? And sharing
Yeah.
behind the scenes. And I felt like I knew them. And so I kind of had to rebrand and say, okay, how can I let people into who I am and what I do?
Yeah, I love that. It's so, so important to just kind of create that like, trust, and know factor. And the perfect way to do that is by showcasing just who we are. And it's really, I feel like people get very overwhelmed because it is something new. You know, when we're in our 9 to 5s or we're training for a new job, we're trained not to share that personal side. And it's not that you're a blank wall when someone comes into your coffee shop to order a coffee, but it's, you're not dying to share the newest Abraham Hicks video that we watched this morning or the new meditation trend that we're doing. So it's kind of reworking that boundary that has already been set in place. So a suggestion I always like to make is starting with 3 things. So my 3 things that I share in my brand consistently can be as simple as coffee, my morning coffee, and just getting people's opinions on different flavors I should try. I'm always talking about what I'm watching on TV, and I'm always sharing what my mom is up to and just the hijinks I get her into.
Oh, that's
And
funny. I
these
bet
are
people love that.
it's if you haven't watched the highlight reel, I get her into some pretty funny stuff and just always catch you off guard. But that has started, those 3 things have started all these big conversations of something as simple as coffee has then turned into, okay, one day I want to start a coffee line. And now I'm talking to people who have done it already. The whole mom conversation is how I wish I had such a great relationship with my parents or anybody who, because I think a lot of times you get in business and people are scared to tell their parents or what their parents are going to say and all that kind of stuff. So that has snowballed into this bigger conversation that I even realized it would. I was really just sharing kind of my personal life, but by putting those walls down a little bit, you're letting people in on such a basic human, genuine connection level. And I love teaching that. But question is, what would you say your 3 things are if you had to pick 3 things about you? I feel like you've got more than 3, but if you had to share your 3 things, what would you say they are?
Yeah, so I kind of, for me, when I think about like my brand, I think about it in terms of like you said, the 3 things, like who I am, like what I want people to know about me, because that's
Mm-hmm.
like the really great thing is like we get to decide what people know. And a lot of people think like, oh, Sarah shares everything online, but I actually don't, you guys. There's a lot that you don't see. That's just for me. So I think about that. But then I also think, because I do run a business, I think about my ideal clients and
Yeah.
like what will help them and serve them. And so for me, like, if you go to my Instagram, if you go to my Facebook group, like you're going to see like a big part of it is like how to create programs, how to sign clients, how to make enough money so that you can fully support yourself doing
Yeah.
work you love. Those are really big. Those are big themes. But then if you are like, okay, well, like what am I getting to know Sarah on like a personal level is going to be, you're going to see my relationship with me and Peter. You're going to see plant-based life,
Yeah.
plant-based living. You're going to see my morning matcha lattes,
Yeah.
which I haven't had yet today. So I'm going on no caffeine yet, but
And
yeah,
she's
so you're
bringing all
going
the
to,
energy, guys.
yeah, so you're going to see those too. So I think people, and I feel like you're like a branding expert, so you can like let me know what you've seen, but I feel like people get really hung up on like branding in terms of like the logo and the color and the design and all of that. And I really think about personal branding. I think about it as like who you are, like
Yeah,
who
that's
are you, like
exactly it
what do
is.
you, what are you all about? Like, what do you want people to know about you? And I know that we can say like, oh, it's so hard to like share this because like you said, we've been in corporate for so long. We've been raised like that. Our parents probably are similar like that. But it's so much easier if you just kind of like, once you can peel the layers, right? Peeling the onion
Mm-hmm.
and just show up as yourself. For me, like it's easy to create content now, one, because I've been doing it for a while, but also because it's just me. And if you can
Yeah.
get comfortable, and I think this is where the personal development comes in, if you can get comfortable in who you are, it's easier to show up. But if you have like some fears, some blocks, which we all do. One of
We
my
all
biggest
do.
fears when I was starting my business was I'm not a good speller. I'm not good at grammar. I have to write all of this content, right? Like, what are people going to think of me? Both of my parents are addicts. So like
Mm-hmm.
not feeling good enough, not feeling smart enough. That was another big one. And once I was like, that doesn't define me. And also seeing other people share that, I was like, wow, with the internet, when you share who you are and what you do, other people see that and they're like, oh, it's okay for me to be who I am too, which is
Yeah.
really beautiful.
It is really beautiful. By us showing up, we're obviously getting our audience getting to know us, but we're giving permission to others to show up authentically and in alignment with who they are too. That is really, really beautiful. I love that. Cool. Thanks for sharing that with us. So as a coach, as a fellow coach, do you work with specifically just health coaches to build their businesses?
Yeah, so I work with health and wellness coaches. So life coaches, spiritual coaches, yoga teachers, anybody in like the health and wellness space,
Mm,
because at the end of the day, like my mission is like has always been and remains the same since transitioning from health coaching to business coaching, as like
yeah.
a healthier and happier world. And I think when people are doing work they love, it's healthier and it's happier. And the clients that I work with, they're going on to help hundreds of other people get healthier. And it's just like this big ripple
Ooh,
effect,
that
which
just gave me the chills. I love
I
that.
know
That's beautiful.
it's so good. So I'll have people who follow me and they're like, oh, I'm not a health coach, but I love your content. I'm like, awesome. Like use it, take it, because a lot of this, it does apply to other areas of, business. But for me, like right now, like I'm just loving working in like the health and wellness space.
Yeah. Well, my question would be like, do you think it's really, really important for coaches to niche down very, very specific, or do you think we can be successful with helping a broader spectrum of people?
This is such a toughie. People
I know.
hate niching down. I did too, because it's like, don't put me in a box. And like, I hear you. I am
Yeah.
I'm a manifester. I like to do what I want when I want. I'm a Taurus, only child. Like, I get
Me
it.
too. Well, I'm an only child, I'm not a Taurus. I get
Okay.
it.
Okay. Yeah. So like, I just like so used to doing what I want to do. But at the end of the day, with my business, what I saw was before I niched down, it was extremely hard to write to people, right? Write my social
Mhm.
media content, send emails. It was very broad. And so when you're very broad, people are going to pick the person who's speaking directly to them, right?
Yeah.
If you are like a yoga teacher, right? And you're like, "Oh, I have this this healthy lifestyle program." And then there's another health coach who's a yoga teacher and is like, I have this yoga program, 30 days helping you become more flexible. And I'm looking for a flexibility program. I'm going to go with the yoga teacher who has a
Mhm.
flexibility program. Even though this yoga teacher could totally have that, she's not marketing herself that way. So for me, I do think niching down is important, especially at the beginning. I think as you kind of figure out your people and like you build an audience, then it's easier to kind of go in different directions. But I think at the beginning, if you're like, I'm having a hard time building up traction, I do think like having a niche can be really powerful.
Yeah. I think people are so afraid to niche down at the beginning because they're just so eager to kind of build it and make the money that they're just like, we'll take whoever. But that's when we get into the situations of we get the clients who aren't necessarily aligned with us, that relationship just feels icky and they're not showing up the way they should. We're not showing up the way we should. So I think you make a very good point of do it before you kind of get to that next level inside your business. And that's when you can really get specific of, okay, maybe I want to widen my audience just a little bit.
Yeah, I found that it was hard to get clients. And then the next part, I actually found like it's harder to get clients when you're not niche down. It's harder to grow when you're not niche down, because it's hard for people to refer you. Like when somebody comes to
Mm.
me and it's like, oh, all of my examples I know are going to be like health related because that's what
No,
I do. But
that's
when
totally
somebody
good.
comes to me and they're like, hey, I'm looking for a health coach who is a mom who understands what it's like to gain weight, I'm like, oh, I know the perfect person, right? Like they're
Mm.
coming with these very specific things. When somebody is like, oh, I need a Pilates instructor, I'm like, oh, I know this perfect person, right? Because they've branded themselves that way. And
Yeah.
it's so much easier to grow when you do that. The second thing, the part about attracting like the wrong people or like people who just like aren't the best fit for you, I found that with that, the branding and like the personal is more important. I told one of my clients that I don't do discovery calls anymore. And she was like, wait, but like, how do you get like the right people? I was like, I always get the right people now. And
Yeah.
the reason being is because the way that I show up, people know what they're getting. They see me on video and then like they'll send me a DM and I can kind of get their vibe and I'll ask them, how
Yeah.
long have you been following me? What have you consumed? And I'll be able to tell very quickly if like they're the right client for me. So
Yeah.
I think that the personal branding and really being authentic and showing like your beliefs, like what do you stand for? What do you dislike,
Yeah.
right? can be so huge in attracting those like soulmate clients.
Yeah, I love that. And it's kind of goes back to what you were saying before, is our brand is us. It is the physical features. Absolutely. It is the logo. It is the colors. It's all of that. But it really is who you are. And I don't like saying this, so just take this with a grain of salt, guys. But when we are selling our services, we're selling ourselves. And I don't mean that in like a way that's like you're selling your soul to your clients. It's more of a just, they want to make sure that they're going to resonate with you. If you're investing in a coach, you're investing a pretty large amount of money, you're investing your time, you want to make sure that that person has got your back through and through. So that's why I feel like it's so important to relate on those morals and values. And the more we're sharing that, we're never going to need discovery calls again if they already know what we're getting. Like think of like bigger influencers that we've been following for years, like an Abraham Hicks or Marie Forleo. We feel like we know them because of how long, number one, how long they've been around, but how good they are at showing, of course, their content, what we're absorbing and teaching from them, but also their personality. We feel like we know them and we may never have a conversation with them. We want to communicate that same vibe with the people we are, of course, going to have conversations with, which are our soulmate clients. I love that. Awesome. Okay. Was there ever a time in your business or your life, and you kind of answered this already, where you felt off brand? So you didn't feel in alignment with what you were doing. So it could be the pivot, but maybe there's something else that's coming to mind. You didn't feel in alignment. You were feeling so off, icky, all those things. And how did you navigate to being back on brand?
Great question. So I think that you'll like this because it was with the pivot. When I pivoted into business coaching, my health coaching business was finally like in the flow. I had I had an in-person assistant at that time who was awesome, would come over, help me with content. Peter was in the flow, like everything was in the flow. And so then with the business coaching, I brought that in and I kind of realized I was like doing both of them for a little bit, right? So I had like a membership site for health and wellness. I was doing that. And then I started taking on a few like business coaching clients. And what I found was I was getting really overwhelmed with which account to post on. And I know some people listening are going to relate to this with like maybe like a personal Instagram and a business Instagram, right? And so, now I never had a personal Instagram because my business Instagram, the health one, was kind of like personal, right? But then now I had this business coaching Instagram account. So I had these two accounts. I had this Facebook group, I had a membership site, and I just had all of these things. And it was very overwhelming. For me, I do really well with like a plan. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm working on. I can just go. And so when I didn't have that, I was feeling like super depressed. I was feeling pulled in multiple different directions. And it just got really overwhelming. And I realized because of how I was feeling, like I was depressed. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to get to work. And that is so unlike me. I'm the person who like wakes up excited to get to work every morning. So I knew immediately, I was like, something's off, and I knew what it was. Right. And so for me, it was like, my quote, if what I'm doing isn't working, something needs to change. So like what needs to change? And so it definitely took like a few, like people were probably like, oh, it took a few months. It probably took a few days. Right. Cause I'm like, I need to figure this out now. And I was just talking to Peter and I was like, I want to do this. And so it's scary it's scary no matter what. I had a nonprofit for a while and I had to let that go just because it wasn't in alignment with what I wanted to be spending my time on at that time. And I thought other people could do it better. And so with this, it was kind of like with the health coaching, that was like our source of income. So saying, okay, I'm not doing that anymore, and that's like your only source of income is like really scary. But at the same time, for me, like, I don't want to not do something just because I'm afraid.
Yeah. We have to connect with the possibilities and let go of those fears.
Yeah. Which is easier said than done.
Oh yeah, of course. Of course.
So that was like a big moment for me. And I was like, I don't feel as passionate about health coaching as I do about business coaching. So I'm going to lean into the business coaching and I'm going to turn all these clients down. I'm going to end this program and I'm not going to do it again. And that was hard because there's a lot of backlash that comes from it when people are like expecting you to be one way and you're like, I don't want to do that anymore. And I've noticed for me, I change a lot. Like I tell my clients all the time, like in 5 years, you might not recognize me because as soon as I kind of figure something out, I'm like, okay, what else can I sink my teeth into? What else can I take on? Right. And I want to live a life of purpose, of meaning, and I want it to be interesting. And so I think I'm going to keep evolving. But yeah, that was a big moment for me. I was like, okay, this is really uncomfortable. I'm feeling depressed. I don't know. I don't have direction. And then it was like, okay, tune in. What do you want to do? Well, I want to do this, but I'm afraid of all these people and what these people will think and our income. But it's like, well, you've done it before. So
Let's
here we
do it
go.
again. Here we go.
So,
Yeah, I love that. And I think if anybody's feeling the same thing about wanting to pivot or wanting to make a huge change, but being worried about what people are going to say, or those people who are expecting us to show up in a certain way, think about it like this. Like, if you're showing up in that mindset of you don't feel aligned with this anymore, or you don't necessarily believe in the message the same way you did at the start, you're almost doing a disservice to those people who are expecting you to come with your highest, fullest energy potential. So by you switching, you're actually doing a service to yourself, number one, and a better service to the community that will either follow you or the new community that's to come.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Like since transitioning, like I love my health coaching clients, and like a lot of them became great friends and we're still great friends, and I can't imagine my life without them. But when I transitioned to business coaching, I was so afraid to do it. I was like, there are millionaires out there. I'm like making like at the time I was making like $13,000 a month. I was like, who's gonna want to hire me? They can get a millionaire, like
Yeah.
what? And that's like something, if you're thinking that too, like who's gonna hire me? I've only been doing this for 6 months, or I've only been doing this for this long, or I'm not as advanced. I put it out there, and immediately I had 12 health coaches reaching out, being like, I've been following you, I've been stalking you, like, can you please help me? And I was like, all right, we're doing it. And it was insane. Like the amount that I knew every time I would show up to a call and I'd be like, oh, your launch isn't going well, or you don't know how to do your program. Oh, let me help you. Like that happened to me. Let me pull up my old program. This is the pivot. Hey, check this out. This worked. And I just had all of this experience, and I was able to help them so much. And it just, I feel like it was meant to be, so if I would have stayed in that position, I wouldn't have been able to have the impact that I'm having now. And that would have been a real shame.
I love that. Listen to that intuitive pull, guys.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your podcast? It's such a cool title, the Why Can't I podcast. How long have you had that?
So I've had Why Can't I podcast probably we might be going on 2 years in February.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been really fun. So the name comes from like my stubborn nature growing up. It's kind of always like, people would always be like, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. You're never going to be able to do that. And I would always say, why can't I? And then a part of the intro, if you listen, is watch me, right? So it's like with a little bit of watch me. And so it's really just motivational, inspirational, sharing it all, like very actionable. I would say my brand is very actionable, inspirational, fun. It's like how to figure out how to get from where you are to where you want to go. What are the steps? So I talk about things like, how to make $10,000 a month as a health coach, how to turn around a failed launch. I talk to other people who have struggled to get their business off the ground and what finally worked for them. I bring on a lot of plant-based and vegan business owners in different fields. So I had like a vegan meal delivery company come on and talk about like, what is that like? How were you able to do that? Because for me, I feel like, a lot of people are like, oh, online business, it's so scary. But the overhead on like an in-person business is a lot higher. We definitely have some things we're paying for. One of my friends once said like, oh, you don't get it because like you don't have to pay that much. I was like, girl, if
you want me to send me my coaching bill?
If only you knew how much I paid for support. But in person like that, I've never done that before. And so bringing some people on who do that, I think has been like really fun too. So the podcast is really fun. If anybody's listening and wants to do a podcast, and I would love to hear like your take, but I have a different take on it where I'm very flexible with it. So if I get an idea or I meet a guest or somebody and I'm like, okay, I want to do it, I'll record, but it's not. And I know this is like very different, like business advice than most people say. It's not like every Tuesday it comes out, super structured. It's more like in the flow, like when I'm feeling it. And people have really resonated with it and it's done really well with that format. And I think it's because that's what works best for me.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, I just feel like that really, really fits into your personality and how you kind of run your business. Like, yes, you're a yes person. You want to do all these things. You want to help all these people, but you, at the same time, you're very into doing what works for you. And when we do what works for us, guys, that's when like the magic happens. That's when the really good conversations happen. That's when the really good programs get put out. That's when the really good posts go out, the stuff that resonates. I think we should push ourselves a bit and challenge ourselves to stick to, whether that's a schedule or putting out that new program within your timeline. But at the same time, we really need to be able to also go with the flow to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agree.
I love that. What would you say to anyone thinking about starting a business, or to somebody who is looking to possibly make that pivot and they're kind of feeling that fear?
Just do it. You got to do it. Lean into it and go for it, because you never figure it out from researching and sitting back. Like, you figure it out by going for it. And like you've heard from my story today, the way that I've gotten to where I am right now is from taking these actions, and the universe will guide you. Once you take one step, something will happen. Somebody will reach out and be like, oh, I love that. Would you want to do this? And you're like, I've always wanted to do that, and it just flows so well. If we can just get over our fear and take action. And it doesn't have to be like this huge action. It can be a small baby step, but don't stay stuck thinking about it. Jump into it and just take one step that moves you forward, because the pieces will start to fall into place.
Yeah, I freaking love that. That's like a perfect place to leave it. But tell us where we can find more of you and what you have coming up next.
Yeah, I've been loving Instagram. Like, I think, you're the same way. So I've been loving Instagram. Like, come over, let me know, send me a DM, let me know that you listened. I'm Sarah_Hagstrom. So come over, say hi. That is where I like to hang out right now. And what do I have coming up next? So I run a mastermind. It's called Health Coaches Sign Clients. And so we're gearing up for the third or fourth round this next week. And so I'm really excited about that, like diving into like helping 18 other health coaches create their program.
That's awesome. That's a nice number for a mastermind.
Yeah, it works really well. I do like everything. I do it my own way. So I take the group and I split them into two mini groups, and then we do like the coaching calls, but then everybody also gets to connect in the group. And, I think with the online business in general, collaboration is so important, and it can kind of be hard when you feel like I felt, right? Isolated, like I'm the only one who hasn't figured it out, so I liked a big part of like my brand is bringing everybody together and being like, hey, how can we help each other so everybody grows? Because there's plenty of clients, there's plenty of opportunity for everybody.
Amen, sister. Right? This is over community over competition. 100%.
I love that. 100%. So yeah, so that's what I'm getting ready. We're gearing up for that, gearing up for the holidays, really excited for all the things. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story and all of your intake. This has been such a great conversation, and I can't wait for people to hear it.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.